Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and thank you all for joining us again this week, whatever you might be doing, whether it's the washing up, outrunning, gardening, or even procrastinating and not writing. Welcome one and all. And we'd like to also thank all of our incredible patrons and Bestseller Academy members who make this podcast absolutely possible each week. So this week we'd like to thank our new patron, Dan McCrory. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining in the fun. Dan. Excellent stuff. And if you would like to join Dan, please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and get tons of extra goodies, such as many hours of amazing deep dives on some very, very specific subjects, which will potentially change your writing life. So we have heard from many, haven't we, Mark?
Oh, yes, we have indeed.
How are you, sir? How's everything life in little old Kent?
It's good. I actually went to that there London town last week.
Oh, yeah,
I went
day
to
out.
The Big Smoke. Yes. Well, it was the first. I had to do some research because the fourth Woodville book has a postman in it. And I'm writing it and thinking, I actually know nothing about the life of a postman in wartime Britain. And it's surprisingly difficult to Google. And I asked my postie and he said, go to the Post Office Museum. And I went up into the archives. Proper archives, and the archivists there were fantastic, and they got me these old magazines, the Post Office magazine, it came out every month, and it's got all these little bits of information. It was gold, absolute gold. And then it was actually, it's that little thing where it's like a school trip, because it's a gift shop and everything. I bought a book,
Did you have a packed lunch?
And yeah, I took a packed lunch, and I bought a key ring.
Did you bring something home for your mum though, Mark?
I did. I bought some biscuits, some cheap biscuits. And then in the afternoon, I went to the British Library and did some editing because I'm editing the book 3 at the moment. And then I met a writer friend, and we had drinks and gossip. And it was the closest I felt to normal for about 2 years, funnily enough. So
fantastic.
That was a really good fun day out.
That's fantastic. Question: yeah. Did they give you white gloves? I remember I watched a Calvin and Hobbes documentary once. Absolutely love Calvin Hobbes. And there was a museum set up, and you could actually look at the very original some of the original illustrations that Bill Watterson did. Ooh. But can you imagine, right? But everyone who was in there, they were given this pair of pristine white gloves, kind of thing you'd see the Queen wearing, and they had to touch it white. Was that the case in the post office?
No, not for this. But I was told I couldn't use my pen. I was given a pencil. No pens allowed in case you spill ink over something.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. Love it.
But the one time I did have to use gloves, and this is
here we go.
I'm a big Stanley Kubrick fan. Okay, very big Stanley Kubrick fan. And a writer friend of mine said, "Did you know all the archive is at the Elephant and Castle? There's an art institute there, and you can't do this anymore. But if you had a reason to be there, you could book a visit and look at his archive." So me and a couple of friends said we were making a documentary.
Of course. Which you were probably planning on doing at some point in your life, right?
Yeah. I could still do it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And they let us in. And it's, you know those archives where you turn the big wheel and the whole thing slides to one side? It was full of his scripts. With his pencil notes in the margin.
Oh my gosh.
For 2001 and Napoleon, the film he never made, and The Clockwork Orange and The Shining.
Oh, wow.
And we were just going through this stuff, and it was just incredible. And then, just before lockdown, there was a big exhibition at the Design Museum, all about Kubrick, and it was all there under glass. You couldn't touch it. And you had to pay £15 to get through the door to see it. And I was like, "Seen that, mate? Been there, done that." So yeah, you can't do that anymore. But
sniff the page.
Absolutely,
sniff the page. You can't do that with a glass cabinet, can you?
He touched those. Those were his scripts.
Wow.
It's touching the hem of genius.
Super inspiring, isn't it? That really, to get really that close to someone, it really makes you feel like you could literally. It's like when I used to walk around the back streets of Cambridge, thinking of all the footsteps I was following, literally. That's amazing.
But if you're a writer, don't be afraid to ask to go to the archives. because you never know what you're going to find. I had no idea what I was going to get, but you always get something out of it, and you can pack a packed lunch and get something from the gift shop.
Well, here's the thing as well. I think it's also must be a really great way of reinvigorating you if you're kind of in a, if you're stuck in your book and you're just feeling a little less inspired. Anything like that can really fill you up with loads of ideas and inspiration. So I love it. I must admit, then, when you said I have a story about when I last used gloves, I was a bit concerned you were going to say during my summer job in the airport. But I'm glad that it was Stanley Kubrick. That was a much better story. Oh my gosh! But isn't that brilliant? Now, question: did you, when you were looking at this Postman Post Office magazine, are we talking about something in wartime? Like it was a 1940s?
This was 1930. It was 1939. It stops in September 1939. Funnily enough, yeah. Wow. So the paper shortages or whatever, other priorities, defeating Hitler. But it was all the run up to it, and of course you can see, they know a war is coming. That's really interesting, these little changes. But it was just all these little things. So it's monthly. And what I love about these old magazines are the adverts, because they tell you about the lifestyle of people at the time, what their ailments were, what things concern them. There were these lovely little adverts where, if we want to go on holiday now, we go to the website and we can see the Airbnb or the resort or wherever it is we're going to.
Virtual tour. Yeah.
These adverts say things like, send off for a fascinating, detailed pamphlet on this holiday home that you'll be staying in. And, you be somewhere, because they're all in the UK. You didn't go overseas for your holiday, not unless you were super posh. So, you'd end up going to somewhere in Wales, some cottage somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you turn up and you had no idea what you were going to get. Yeah. So holidays then, if you could afford to take one, was such a gamble.
Right. And no TripAdvisor to have a good old moan about the bugs in the bed, no running water. Isn't it amazing though? Isn't it amazing? I mean, it takes you right back into that time. And I think in some ways it's one of the amazing things. Like right now, my focus right now, obviously people are very focused on all the scary stuff happening in the world, but what I'm desperately clinging on to is feeling grateful for the stuff that we've got. Right. And I think, just to be able to go into the kitchen and get some food out of the fridge, or get a glass of water from the sink. But I think when you go back into the archives and you read stories, you see adverts of what people are actually advertising, it does make you appreciate what we have today. And I guess there's a real, you have to kind of get into that mindset of the character that had to live through times where those certain things were kind of the normal way of life. And I love it. Really, really fascinating. Yeah. God, everyone should do that. All right. If you've been to an archive somewhere in the world, let's have the most interesting archives that people have ever visited. My dad actually went to Mauritius many years ago as an excuse, because my grandfather's born in Mauritius. So he went and did genealogy, and he spent the whole time they went several times, and he traipsed around graveyards. I mean, talk about a split holiday. My mum was on the beach having a wonderful time, sunbathing and swimming in the ocean. My dad was traipsing around graveyards and looking in old books. But yeah, it's, the stories that he came back with, the things that he learned about our family history, absolutely fascinating, and gives you kind of a context of where you are in the world today as well. It's brilliant stuff. Excellent stuff. You also mentioned before we jumped on that, there's been a few more developments with your little project that's kicked off in the last few weeks. Yeah, well, this movie, like I said, we got our first chunk of money, and we're about to offer the role to one of the lead roles to an actor, and they're American, because the producer wants at least one American in the script, because we're American investors. And so I've been Americanizing two characters who are related. You can't Americanize one without Americanizing the other. Right. So that's something I'll be. And that happens quite a bit if you're a UK screenwriter, because, if the money comes from America, they're like, well, we want an American in the story. So it's like, okay. But in this instance, sometimes it's like, oh, how am I going to crowbar an outsider into this? But in this one, it was really easy. It was just, changing a few
change. Just it was a dialogue change. The rest was really straightforward. But it's good fun. It's good fun because myself and the director, we go through the script doing silly accents, all the really bad sort of New York accents all the way through it. So that was fun.
Excellent stuff. And talking of big opportunities, you had the chance to chat with an incredible author who's been on quite a journey the last 8 years, should we say? And tell us a bit about our special guest, Cathy Bramley, today, Mark.
Well, Cathy Bramley, she's author, best-selling author of romantic comedies, and she's a bit of a legend. And as you'll hear in the interview, she was someone whose name kept coming up again and again and again as someone who was doing something different, who was doing something extraordinary that we frankly struggled to replicate ourselves. So it was I've long wanted to speak to Cathy, and she's the author of best-selling romantic comedies like Ivy Lane, Appleby Farm, Conditional Love, Wickham Hall, Plumbury School of Comfort Food, and she comes from a marketing background, and I think this is why she's been such a great pioneer. She's got a new book called The Summer That Changed Us, but she tells us all kinds of stuff, not least there's stuff about an extraordinary book launch, which has a unique twist, and she talks about working with books that have been serialized before coming out as a full novel, and how that's changed the way she writes.
Brilliant. And listen out for one of my favourite titles of the year, and I'll tell you about what that is after. So let's jump in and have a listen to Mark speaking to the absolutely lovely Cathy Bramley.
Cathy Bramley, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It's our pleasure, absolute pleasure. We're going to be talking about your book, The Summer That Changed Us. And as usual, whenever I do an interview, I'll look things up, I'll look up reviews. Now, at the time of recording, the book isn't out yet, although by the time this goes live, the book probably will be out. But I was looking at Goodreads, looking at the reviews, and I discovered one of our long-term listeners and patron supporters and author, Pernilla Hughes, the author of Punch Drunk Love and probably The Best Kiss in the World, she's given it a review, and it's 5 stars, so you can relax, Cathy. It's 5 stars. But just to give it some sort of context, Pernilla says, "The summer that changed us swept me away. The northeast coastal setting and the sea glass collecting and the heartwarming relationship of these 3 women. Strangers at first, they each have their troubles, but as a sisterhood, they support and encourage one another. And who wouldn't want that in their life? A gorgeous read with vibrant, ballistic women, sensitively faced issues, and heroes you'll want for yourself." Can't ask for more than that. That's a fantastic review. Thanks.
I love that woman. I love that woman.
She's amazing. She is absolutely amazing. So, that kind of sets us up. What else can you tell us about The Summer That Changed Us, Cathy?
Well, started off, I had the idea for it years ago, actually. And I was at a Christmas party, and it was all people from my husband's school, a long time ago. He's not a teacher, so it was a long time ago. It was all a bit of a reunion. And one of them was living in Northumberland on the coast in Amble. And she'd got a picture for her friend, like a small frame. And I think it was a heart sort of made in stones inside this frame. I said, "That's really beautiful. What is it?" And she said, "It's sea glass." And I didn't really know much about it. I'd heard of sea glass, but I'd never really thought too much about it. I said, "Wow, that's absolutely beautiful." She said, "Well, we just find it on the beach, and my friends and I would go for a walk on the beach, and it's like therapy. We're picking up the sea glass and putting it in a basket and chatting away to each other, putting the world to rights." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's just the perfect setting for a book, one of my books, or women supporting each other, doing something really nice, being on the beach. I love the beach and the sea myself." And so I had this idea years ago for this book, all thanks to Julie Smith. Thank you, Julie. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give that a go. So I then started to think about what the story could be and brainstormed it with one of my children, and we just came up with the idea for these 3 women, all different ages, different life stages, that met unexpectedly on the beach, and then started to get together to talk about, to collect sea glass, but also they've all got an absolute nightmare going on in their lives. And the strength of their friendship enables them to sort of work through their problems and, work towards a happy ending.
Wonderful stuff. Just to dial back there, brainstorming with one of your children, are you kind of family that sits around the dinner table and you start bouncing story ideas about? Is that how it works?
Well, it used to be that I would get them in the car, lock the doors, set off on a long journey and say, right, let me tell you about my next book. But they're older now. So Phoebe's 22, Isabel's 20. And I actually think we might have been heading up to the northeast coast. Oh, no, it can't have been. Anyway, wherever we were going, I said, I've got this idea. And what could the secret be? What could one of the youngest one, what could her secret be? So we started brainstorming all the things it could be. So yeah, they're really good at that sort of thing. And they don't actually read my books, annoyingly, but I have said, one day they'll be in charge of my estate and they'll have to read them. And, the longer they leave it, the more books there's going to be. So it's about time that they split the list between them and started reading.
This has been a running theme over the last few episodes. Actually, Cathy, you're not alone. I can't get my kids to read my books, and we've had a couple of authors say exactly the same thing. So it seems to be quite a common phenomenon with authors trying to get members of their family to read their books. Is that for the best, do you think, or is it something that they need to be involved with, or?
Well, I think with the two of them, they're very, they've got so much other stuff in their lives. And, young people with phones have got so many different, forms of entertainment in their pocket that getting them to actually read is quite tricky. They're both massive readers when they were little. And they do like to read, but they just don't have a space in their day for it. It'll come back to them. I know it will. It will come to them eventually. And Phoebe will read a book on holiday.
Right.
Isabel will occasionally have a spurt of reading and then put books down for another year. So it's there.
Okay, good stuff. I was looking at your social media as well, Cathy, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes. But you had some pictures the other day at Orion, your publisher, and there's all kinds of pictures, what they call champagne moment, where you all gather, have a bit of champagne, prosecco, or whatever. And there's Sam, friend of the podcast, Sam Eads, with a cooking pot on her head. Can you give us some sort of context for that?
All I can say is, since maternity leave, she's just been, she's gone off on one. No, I've done an article for a magazine that'll be out in next month for The Woman in Home, and the feature's called My Life in a Picture. It's a regular slot every month, and we decided we'd do something about the summer that changed me, basically. So we sent us a lot of pictures all around the summer when I graduated, and I had this mad summer of freedom and doing all these different things. I sent loads of lovely pictures of me in bikinis and me in tropical places and everything. And the picture they chose was me in a tent in the where it had been flooded out with a saucepan on my head. Comedy value. The comedy value obviously won the day over the glamour. So she thinks this is hilarious and decided when she did her little introduction to the champagne moment to talk about the book that she would wear a saucepan on her head. So
it'll be all the rage this summer. You see, in Paris, they'll all be going around with saucepans on their head. Just you wait. Let's go back to where it all started, because your story is extraordinary. And I remember when I was at Orion, before you were published by Orion, I worked in the digital department. We did eBooks. We looked after Amazon, and your name came up so much because of the innovative way that you published your stories, and it was just extraordinary. But let's go right back to your first book, Conditional Love, which you self-published. This was, I think, 2013, 2014-ish.
That's right, yeah.
Tell us why you went down the self-published route to start with.
I'd been to lots of different writing events and festivals and weekends and stuff, and everything that I was hearing just kept repeating the message that agents receive 2,000 unsolicited manuscripts a week, the chances of being picked up, the chances of being published, it was just so depressing. And actually I just didn't like the statistics. So I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to submit a manuscript and then sit miserably at home to be rejected. So my own background is in marketing and PR. So I had my own PR and marketing agency for a long time, and I thought, I can market a book. I don't know anything about publishing, but I can market a book because I should be able to market anything, but what I don't know is can I actually write one? So I set myself the challenge that was the tricky bit. So I set myself the challenge to write this book, and I thought, well, I'll self-publish it, and I will just use everything in my armor to try and get publicity and to try and get sales. And so I did. And so I launched it myself, and I decided I live in a little village, and we have a phone box that's been converted into a library or a book exchange.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that's the perfect place to have a book launch. I approached the Guinness World Records and said, I'd like to go for the world record of the world's smallest book launch. And they wrote back and said, I was there. I was thinking about, them turning up with the tape measure and everything, Norris McGuirt, trying to measure it, showing my age. And they wrote back and said, no, sorry, we can't measure that. So I thought, well, never mind. But I thought, well, by then I'd said I was going for the world record anyway. So I just carried on the theme, invited the mayor to come down, and got permission to take all the books out of the telephone box and put all of mine in. And I had a call from the mayor's secretary the day before. She said, yeah, we're still looking forward to tomorrow, but we just can't find the bookshop where you're having the launch. I was like, oh, well, don't worry. There'll be plenty of bunting. You'll see it. You'll see the signs. And of course, there I got this huge ribbon tied up around the phone box, and he was a very good sport, and he cut the ribbon, and inside was all my books. So that was how I launched it, as the world's smallest book launch. And actually, I've had loads of publicity from that. So even though I didn't really set a world record, it gave me a lot of publicity, and the book did really well. And I'd got my second book lined up to go. I sent that out to agents. An agent, what was I talking about? An agent, because I'd identified who I wanted to be with at the time. And she was like, yeah, just send it me for Christmas and I will read it. But during that period, I had a phone call from another editor who said, I've got an idea. I would like to discuss serializing some fiction with you. What do you think? And that led me into the other thing you were hinting at there about the way I have published.
Well, before we jump into that, because this is extraordinary. This is, you used all your marketing and PR genius there and boo to the Guinness Book of Records for not turning up to that, because that would be amazing. But yeah, I've looked, I've been looking into this. You sent reviewer copies. You helped organize a blog tour. You did all the kind of indie stuff, which is fairly commonplace now, less so than when you were launching. What were the biggest lessons you learned from that? Was there anything you would have done differently?
I don't think I would have done it differently. I think I was happy with what I did. What I did learn was that self-publishing is really, really hard work. Yeah. It really is. And, I've having run my own PR and marketing company and hearing people say, well, I can do that myself. Why should I hire a PR company when I can do that myself? I knew full well the benefit of having all that team around me, that you would get as a traditionally published author. So that was the big appeal for me, is to having a team of experts that I can rely on to do certain bits of it. Otherwise, you're just wearing so many hats.
Yeah.
And I think you can, as a self-published author, you can do as much or as little marketing as you wish, but there's never really an end to it. You can always do a bit more, or that applies to however you're published, I guess. But it does mean for me now that I can focus on the writing a bit more and less so on the marketing. And that I found really heavy going when I was by myself.
But then, like, as you say, you sent off to one agent, which fascinates me. So you went through a process of figuring out the best agent to send your book to. How did that work for you?
Yeah. It was good. What I did was I was obviously self-published and then wanted a traditional publishing deal, and I'm particularly happy to take on someone that has been self-published. So I knew that this particular agent had taken on other authors that I knew. I knew that she had contact with the editors that I was interested in working with. So I really did my research, and I used Twitter for that a lot. Twitter was great for that sort of thing. So yeah, highly recommend going that route and doing your research before you send off a lot of different pitches to people.
And you also, as you say, you got the attention of an editor at Transworld. And so they got in touch with you and they suggested this idea of serialization. So tell us about that.
Well, it was Harriet Borton at the time, who was, I think she was senior editor at Transworld, and she'd had this idea of releasing fiction maybe monthly. Actually, her idea was monthly. I quickly put the kibosh on that. So there's no way I can do something monthly. So I had the idea for doing something set on an allotment. And I thought, actually, because it's being outdoor and we could link it into the seasons. So I managed to sell her in on the quarterly idea, which seemed to go very well. And that was the way we continued, actually. And she had this idea of just sort of having something which is almost like on subscription, really, for readers that they could buy into for 99p and just sort of, buy themselves a novella, which actually is a great way of getting to know a new author, without having to spend a lot of money. And it just seemed to work. So I loved the idea. We did Ivy Lane. I wrote Ivy Lane first, and that was published in 4 parts over 2014. And then the paperback came out the following year. And I wrote another one. So the second serial then came out in the same year, 2014, which I think was Appleby Farm. Would I be right? I think it was, yeah. And so, yeah, it started from there. And it seems to do really well. Readers liked it. There were always a few that told us that we were trying to rip people off. Trying to rip people off by splitting it into 4 parts. But actually we weren't, because the full book was £4 and the individuals were 99p. So it was the same price.
As I understand it, Cathy, what happened was you would release the 4 parts, and then at the end you would release the complete book. Is that correct?
That's right. So we would have the 4 parts would either be, they would be roughly every 2 months or every 6 weeks. And then after the 4th part, there'd be about 3 or 4 month gap, and we'd release the paperback and a full ebook, which contained all the 4 parts as well. And readers seemed to love it. It just really grew. And I could tell from the market, because there were other people coming in and doing a similar thing, that it was obviously working across the board for other publishers too and other authors too. So yeah, it was quite an exciting time, actually.
It really was. I can tell you from my perspective, working at Orion, we had lots of conversations about this, thinking about how we could replicate this and how we could do it. And Harriet, I know Harriet because she went on to work at Orion, and she's an absolute genius for this sort of thing. But publishers can be very, very inflexible about scheduling, and it was quite difficult to replicate, I think. But it clearly worked for you. I mean, you had the Wickham Hall series, Lemon Tree Cafe, A Match Made in Devon, Appleby Farm, Plumbury School of Comfort Food, A Patchwork Family. This is the pattern that worked for you. And I know it's something that indie authors have done, but of course it's something they can do because they're often just an individual. But it worked brilliantly, and it gave you such a great spread of stories for your readers. The one thing that fascinates me: did the serial format make you more conscious of keeping the reader on the hook? That idea of every maybe 20,000 words or so having some sort of cliffhanger, having something that brought the reader back.
Absolutely. And I love writing like that. I thought it was going to be really difficult. But once I'd done Ivy Lane and Appleby Farm, I thought, God, this is a great way. It's actually a really refreshing way to write. So I would view my novel as a 4-part drama series, like if you was going to watch a 4-part drama on TV. So each episode has to have something major and leave you with a question at the end, or, so there's got to be the rising action has to be in each part. But still with an overarching story, which, takes the reader from the first the first chapter to the last chapter. And I found that really fascinating. And it actually, even though I don't always write in series form now, I still think that way. So Hetty's Farmhouse Bakery, which I didn't serialise, that is written in 3 parts.
Right.
So actually, if anyone ever wants to make a drama series out of that, there's 3 episodes there ready to go. So just to put it out there. So I do find it a really lovely way to write. And when I'm in the first draft mode, which is a bit of a slog, I can sort of have a little breather after I get to the end of part 1, part 2, part 3. It's like, quartered. Whereas when you're writing a whole book from 0 words to 100,000 or whatever, it seems like a never-ending journey, doesn't it? But breaking it down and having a little celebration at the end of it, perfect.
That's such a great way of thinking of it. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And as you mentioned there, a lot of your more recent novels, so White Lies and Wishes, Merry Christmas Project, My Kind of Happy, and The Summer That Changed Us, the new book, they've not been serialized. What's prompted that change? Is it just sort of change in the market or the change that you've been working? Or is it just that, you wanted to try something different?
I think it's nice to be a leader in a trend. But after a while, I think, you have to be the one that maybe innovates and looking at a different publishing pattern. And that's something we're considering now. Can't say too much about that. Ooh. But that's something we are looking at, a new pattern for going forward. And also, there is now an awful lot of novels that are sold at 99p almost continuously. So there's this 99p market. And, and it's difficult to offer value, when you're selling your novella or the quarter of the novel for 99p and the whole one for £3.99, but a lot of your competitors are out there at 99p. It sort of reduces the value of the market, doesn't it? So there was that to contend with. I think, as the market's changed, I think you need to change as well. Change with it.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. One thing I've seen crop up in interviews with you as well is that you've mentioned that the novels are essentially standalones, but there are crossovers from other books. So you've said readers of My Kind of Happy will recognise the florists and some of the customers from reading the Lemon Tree Cafe and Patchwork Family. So this is the Cathy Bramley literary universe. So how do you keep track of all that?
Well, actually, with great difficulty. But when I start a new book, I always have an A4 notebook, and then in the back page, I write A to Z down the side, on each line, A to Z on every line. And then I'll write any new characters' names. I'll write. So if I've got Aidan, goes on the A, Zach goes on the Z, etc. So then I can always keep track of the names, and I've got all those books, so I can go back and check all the names, which is really good. It also stops me, I've just written a scene, which I had a Lisa, a Lavinia, and a Leslie, all 3 new characters, all in one scene. So it stops me from doing that. But I asked my readers, actually, can anyone remember what's the name of the dog? Or, so that I do that as well. But I do really like that. I like having those books that you mentioned, My Kind of Happy, The Lemon Tree Cafe, and A Patchwork Family, were all set in a village called Barnaby. And it's just characters from that village and the things that they get up to. So you don't really need to start at the beginning. But some people like to do that, because relationships do develop. But in fact, the first one, precursor to all of those, was the Plumbury School of Comfort Food, because the Rosie, who's the main character in the Lemon Tree Cafe, was somebody's flatmate in that first book. So it sort of goes right back to then. And I wasn't planning on doing another book. After I did the Lemon Tree Cafe, I had no intention of writing another book in that village, but a reader got in touch and said, could you do a story about Gina, the childminder? I think there's more to discover there. I was like, is there?
Wow.
I went back to read about Gina. I thought, do you know what? You might be right. So that's how that happened.
That's brilliant.
Thank goodness for eagle-eyed readers. That's what I say.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, normally this is where I ask what you're doing next, but it sounds like you're doing some sort of top secret, innovative, super duper marketing project that's going to change the way we read books. So I guess you can't tell us.
I think I may have over-egged that one.
Can you tell us anything about what's coming next?
I can. So I'm just doing the second draft of my Christmas book. So I had my first ever Christmas book came out last year. It's called The Merry Christmas Project. And this year there will be a sequel, an actual sequel, which I've never done before, called Merrily Ever After. And I'm just working on that. So that'll be out for this Christmas. And I've had lots of people asking for a sequel, and I keep saying yes. For once, I can say, yes, there is one.
What are the challenges so far in writing a sequel if you've not done one before? To keep the story fresh, because obviously you put your main character through all sorts of trials and tribulations, and you don't want to have to put them through hell again a year later. It doesn't seem very fair. So it's bringing something new to the story, moving their story along, but bringing something entirely new to it as well. So that's what I hope I've done. I'm quite excited about it, actually. It's quite different. It's hard. It's the hardest book I've written, actually. Although, to be honest, Mark, I think I might say that every time. Yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling all too well. Folks, The Summer That Changed Us is out now. It's got a beautiful, bright, sunny cover. It's exactly the kind of book that's going to get us through this year. So grab a copy right now. Cathy, thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been absolutely brilliant, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. And that favourite title that I mentioned, Mark.
Go on.
A Match Made in Devon. Absolutely brilliant. Love it. Quintessentially, how quintessentially English can you get? But I have a very special place for Devon in my heart. If you're in Devon listening to this podcast right now, I do envy you, and I love your county. We used to go on holiday in Devon all the time.
But people do. Devon and Cornwall. Devon and Cornwall. You know, people outside the UK might not understand this, but Devon and Cornwall are kind of this peninsula at the sort of bottom left-hand corner of the UK. Stunning landscape. Absolutely amazing. Good surfing there as well, actually,
yes.
which is unusual for the UK.
That's where we went on holiday.
Yeah. And it's full of wonderful history and magic and
castles.
And because people, I mean, we had this with Liz Fenwick as well, because she writes about Cornwall. Because people like you have that association, because it is the place you go on. You go Devon and I've been to both. Devon and Cornwall on your holidays as a child. Everyone has a soft spot for those places. So when you write a novel about how special Devon or Cornwall is, people are going to go, yeah, I remember that, and they're much more likely to pick it up.
Absolutely. Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, toffees, seaside village shops. I mean, you could go on, couldn't you? Brilliant stuff. And I see how I'm getting very nostalgic now, being here on the very furthest west coast of Canada. But what else is more? What would you say is more quintessentially English than a box of toffees from Devon? It has to be the good old red British telephone box. It doesn't get better than that, does it? But this is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you walk through London, you often see tourists leaning out of one, having their photo taken.
Oh, completely.
It happens all the time. I can't remember the last time I actually used one to make a phone call. It's probably about 20 years ago.
Do they still actually? Yeah, they don't have phones in them anymore, do they?
I think some of them do, yeah, but they also have the internet hubs as well, and so yeah.
The thought of getting into a red telephone box to go to the internet kind of would make you think that something really scary would happen, like it might take off and turn into a rocket ship, or do some kind of Doctor Who kind of equivalent. But absolutely love the story that Cathy talked about. I mean, what a brilliant idea. And you've mentioned that before, haven't you, on the podcast, that you've actually got a book library in a red telephone box is it in your actual village or
yeah,
nearby?
It's just up the road. It's like a mile up the road. And if I go for a walk, I'll take some, old books with me and pop them in. And when I publish a new book, I always pop one in there, whether they want it or not.
Well, that's a bit of a risk though, isn't it? That was like the time that my car got broken into and they ransacked everything. And I had in my glove compartment a copy of my album, and it was the only thing that was left. Right? So it's a bit of a risk putting your book in the library and walking past it every day and going, bloody hell, no one's taken it yet. 3 years later, it's like cobwebs up in the corner, like, bloody hell, well, if you don't want it, I'll have it back then. But no, I love it because we've got a few, the thing in Canada, at least where I live, they're lovely, actually. People have if they've had to chop a tree down in their front yard, and they've got they've kind of got a pedestal of what used to be the trunk of a tree, and then they build some beautifully ornate wooden book box, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
And it's quite small. I mean, book box, but I think of like telephone box. That's a proper library. That's like got shelving and everything, right? Yeah. How many books can you get in one of those things? Yeah,
well, there's some. There's quite a few, and they're all sorted alphabetically. They've got children's books at the bottom. It's
they're a librarian full. Almost that's actually going and sorting them every day.
I think someone in the parish is in charge of it and goes in and refreshes it and all that kind of thing, which is great. So yeah,
fantastic.
And it is great. I'm slightly annoyed. I didn't think of the phone box book launch myself. It was right there in front of me.
It was, and it always is. It always is. This is the thing. And we talked about this. In fact, we talked about like doing crazy ideas of thinking of something, but Cathy's proven, and obviously she comes from marketing and PR background, so her kind of mind works that way. She's been in that world, and so she'll always come up with a question like, what's the kind of craziest, strangest, most brilliant way to gain free publicity and launch this book? But I think it's absolutely a brilliant lesson for every author. A lot of authors says, "Oh, I'm not good at marketing," but the point is that you just need some imagination. And what do you have in abundance as a writer? Then imagination. I mean, you come up with all these crazy things that happen in your book. Well, come up with a crazy thing of how to promote your book in the real world. It's not about marketing or PR. It's just about being inventive and coming up with something original and different that people want to write about.
You're absolutely right. We apply that imagination to everything but ourselves.
Yeah, it's just a mental block. It's just it's like, oh no, I can't do marketing. It's like people who say, oh no, I'm not good with computers. I press a button and something goes wrong. It's like we predetermine in our minds that we shouldn't be allowed to touch or think about anything. But it's just this kind of sense of the unknown, or having never ever come up with an idea like that before. And I absolutely love it, and totally applaud Cathy for doing it. And how much of that was part of her story as an author? Like, how much of that gave her that momentum and impetus that ended up leading to all the success?
It gave her a photo in the local paper of her cutting a big ribbon, and the mayor is there. And then that makes, because she said she self-published that first book in order to get the attention of agents and publishers. So now she's getting publicity, and she's got that proof. She's got that proof to take to them, saying, look what I did. I love that she invited the mayor. That's one of those things, again, mayors in the UK, this isn't like in the States where it's actually quite an important position. With all respect to mayors with their big, long medals and everything, it's like, what do you actually do except come along and cut ribbons? I'm sure they do great things. But honestly, because it makes me think there's a comedian in the UK called Joe Lycett who had an opening for his kitchen extension, and he invited the mayor, and the mayor came and opened it, and he's got a little plaque up and everything. So, it. It's worth, if you're it's funny, when I did that literary festival a couple of weeks ago, they weren't mayors, but they were a lord and lady. They knew Malcolm, the other author, and a lord and lady came along and tweeted about it afterwards. So over in the UK, we've got Rent-A-Toff. You can just
I tell you what, if I was going to do a book launch and get some royalty over in the UK, it would have to be the I can't remember the name of them now, the people that wear all the milk bottle tops on their shirts. Who are those folks?
Oh, well, like Pearly Cockney Kings, Pearly King, Pearly Queen.
Pearly King and Pearly Queen.
He's at Mother Brown. He's at Mother Brown.
Chaz and Dave would be there to do the musical entertainment in a pub afterwards. But yeah, I mean, but the point is that there's a wealth, like we all think about, oh yeah, Facebook ads, oh yeah, Amazon ads. I mean, do you know, really, when you think about it, there's a lot of free opportunities out there which will probably get you way more than paying Mr. Zuckerberg even more money. So I think do it just for that. Just do it in defiance.
Stick it to Zuckerberg.
Stick it to the big boys. But I love it. And so if you've had, so we want to hear about from you, if you've ever had a unique book launch, we want to hear about it. Send us in your book launch and we'll give it a mention. Hey, if it's really good, we might even get you on the show to find out a little bit more about it, especially if it, like Cathy, it ended up leading to some really incredible things happening in your career. So do get in touch. Come to bestsellerexperiment.com and click on the contact box. And the secret is that little form comes directly to me and Mark. We don't have our team of staff that go through our emails.
I wish we did.
I know exactly, right? But our mailbox each week and then pick out, we picked out a couple for you to go through, sir. No, we don't. We actually we get these emails directly into our inbox. So you might get a response from one of us. But we do read them all. So do please get in contact. Now, Mark, what else jumped out for you?
Well, let's talk about this serialization thing. This idea that she did the 4 small books and then released them as a big book at the end, as a complete novel at the end. And that was I think it was she said it was Harriet Borton at Transworld, who then, funnily enough, came to work at Orion, and she's terrific. She's one of those editors who's always on the cutting edge of stuff, always looking for new ways to do things. And the fact that Transworld came to Cathy and said, let's do this, that makes all the difference, I think, because I know other publishers have tried to replicate it. I know we tried to replicate it. Actually, we did it with what's his name, the guy who wrote Downton Abbey, Julian Fellows.
Yes,
we did it with him. He had a series called Belgravia that we serialized, but it was such an upheaval. It had to be a major event. It's not something that everyone can do because publishers, I said they're kind of inflexible in the interview with Cathy, but the fact is publishers have a critical path away, because you've got all these different departments all queued up to do things at a certain time. So you've got the sales department, the marketing department, the publicity, the production department, the art department. They all have their moment in the critical path, and it's always so many months ahead of publication. And if you start shifting that about, then you really upset the apple cart. Things can go really, really wrong. So to do something that Harriet and Cathy did at Transworld would have been a big upheaval, would have been a big gamble. No one would have known if it could have actually worked, but they made it work, and it worked, absolutely brilliantly.
I think
so much so they did it again and again,
Yeah. I mean, it made me realize, actually listening to that, it made me realize that, I've always banged on about the importance of events. As an author, you want as many events as possible because that keeps you, keeps you in the world of the reader. It gives you content to post, and emails to send out, and Twitter posts and Facebook posts and all that good stuff. But I can totally appreciate now that a launch for a major publisher, whether it's for a part 1 of a 4-part serial or the next big major blockbuster from a major blockbuster author, it's a lot of work. So to do kind of 4 of those for what in essence is 1 book is hard. But from an indie author's perspective, I think it's a lot more doable, and it actually really helps, doesn't it? Because what's the hardest thing as an indie author? But how do you keep on getting your name out there? Why you need another excuse to kind of reach back out to the audience, and it's not just a kind of like a little update, but it's actually, hey, it's part 2 of my 4-part series coming out. I think it's a brilliant idea, absolutely brilliant. But I also loved what Cathy said about this idea of how it forced her to really think about some major moments at the end of each one of those quarter books. And surely by the time the final book comes out with all 4 parts, you're going to have a stronger book there, right? Because if you've had to come up with 4 major cliffhangers, or 3 major cliffhangers, I guess, and then the climax, that's going to be a great read, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And she talked about it as a 4-part TV series with rising action in each part. And I think that's terrific. That's a really great way to think of storytelling and keeping the reader on the hook and delivering on, the promise of the story. Yeah. So it's even though she's now writing full-length novels and not doing the serialization thing, it's carried over.
It's still there.
Her writing. Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. And in fact, it reminds me of those conversations we had when we were writing Back to Reality, where we were getting not just down to end of like parts, the end of that whole arc, if you like, but we were trying to bring it right the way back down to the end of each chapter. And so it's a great reminder to everyone to say, are you keeping your readers on the hook? Are you making them stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning when they've got an appointment the next morning because you've put something on that final page? Or, have you stopped it partway through where you just left them wanting more? I think it's such a massively important thing to think about. And I love the fact that this kind of model in some ways forces you into doing that. The other thing I wanted to mention actually was a really interesting analogy to draw with this 4-part drama, because one of the things that I've noticed in music over the years is this idea of an EP. And you think about it in terms of books, there isn't really an EP. There's short stories and then there's, the actual book. Whereas in music, you've got singles, you've got EPs, which stands for extended play. And an EP, for people that aren't familiar, it's like typically like a 3, 4, 5 track mini album basically, and it's actually it's always been very popular. It's even more popular now, and it can precede the album, and then obviously you have the big thing at the end, which is the album. And I've always said to people that if you're going to release an EP, don't just release the EP because that's one event. What you should do is you should release single 1, single 2, single 3 on a 4-track EP, and then the 4th track is the EP with the extra track on it. And I was wondering, when I was listening to Cathy talk about this, I was thinking it's interesting that it's part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and then the book. The way I would have done it would be part 1, part 2, part 3, and then release the book with the new part in it, which means now that could be hard for some people that have already bought 1, 2, and 3, and then they have to buy but if it's 99p anyway, it doesn't make any difference. But
this is so weird because I had this exact conversation
really
in a market when we were talking about doing this at Orion.
How
and someone suggested that, and I said, that's fine if you want the author to be flooded with 1-star reviews from people going, what a bloody rip-off. And I know Cathy said, she got accusations of rip-off there in that they're buying the whole, and then you can buy it as one whole thing. But if you don't, you've got to give people the option. You've got to give people the option of okay, I want to do this in 4 parts, and that's lovely. Or I'll wait for the whole thing and read the whole thing. Yeah. But if you go 1, 2, 3, and then they've got to pay out another 6-7 quid for the full thing.
I guess if it's we see the thing. The interesting way of doing it, I guess you can't really do it this way. But the way to do it is if you've already bought the first 3, you get the 4th one. You get the book for like the cost of what the 4th one would be. But that's probably too hard to do in terms of Amazon. I mean, you should try and work that one out. Yeah. But that's the way that a lot of people do it in music. But the interesting thing is that it's actually a model that's very successful in music, and they do it. Yeah. They always do it every time they release the compilation album, the greatest hits. They always, in fact, Massive Attack. I've got a chip on my shoulder at Massive Attack because we were one time in our life when we were pitching a new single to BBC Radio 1, Radio 2. And it was a Joe Wiley show. Remember Joe Wiley show all the way years? I think she's on BBC 2 now, isn't she? Radio 2. But we were head to head that week. It was either us or Massive Attack, whose single was going to get picked to go on the playlist at Radio 1, Radio 2. And what Massive Attack had done is they were literally just releasing their greatest hits, and they'd written the new song. Because they always do that. They always stick one extra song on just so everyone's got something new. And it's usually not very good. Usually it's the one like, this wasn't even a hit.
It's not even a hit. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But you've got to buy the album. Yeah.
And they picked Massive Attack over us. So I love Massive Attack.
Streaming's changed that though. What they're doing now. So my favourite new band is a band called Wet Leg. And they released a single called Chaise Long, and they've released 2 or 3 singles, and then the album is coming in April. And what they're doing is, I got a notification saying because I subscribe to Apple Music, as some people subscribe to Spotify.
Yeah.
So they're going, oh, new song. And it just keeps reminding you that there's an album coming. Because, of course, albums are becoming a bit of an anathema. You know, do people listen to albums anymore, or do they just create playlists? But this idea of getting people excited about the album, so you drip feed tracks in the run up to the album's release. And again, how we do that. I mean, what I've been doing as a writer is I'm doing lead magnets. So I had so last year I had what I called the Miss Charlotte Quartet. So if you've read The Crowfolk and Babes in the Wood, there's a character called Miss Charlotte, and she could be hundreds of years old. And if you want to know her backstory, it's in that quartet. So I released one a month over 4 months. And then you've got the whole sort of her whole backstory in those 4 stories. And I'm just preparing a new story now, which is going to be like a prequel to the 3rd book. So, you know, you can't, I guess that's the way you can do that as an author, is you can say, look, here's a little, well, I mean, Mark Hood did it last week with, you know, he's got his sequel to War of the Worlds, and he released a lead magnet called Amy's Story, which I finished last night and really enjoyed. So, you know, that is, I guess, the way that we can do that. We can't necessarily sell it, but we can use it as a lead magnet to get newsletter subscribers and drive some interest and bang the drum before release.
What I love about this model is it breaks down this incredibly huge mission that people are scared of doing, which is writing a whole book. You know, writing. It feels like such a massive undertaking. I know a lot of people listen to this show are planning on writing their novel one day, but they just don't have the time just yet. And I think when you start to break it down, I think, well, what if I just wrote part 1 and then could get that out there, and you start to get the benefit of the feedback loop that we know is so important in helping us little writers, like isolated in our little boxes, to actually interact with the world out there. And so I love that this is possibly an entry point for many people who, you know, they're not ready to write a full-length novel yet, but they definitely maybe give part 1 of a 4-part series a crack. I think it's great. So if that's you, do it. Yeah, there you go. And challenge for this week.
and we know it works because it's nothing new. I mean, Conan Doyle and Dickens used to do this. When I was a bookseller, Stephen King brought out The Green Mile, one a month from March to August. So boom, 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 boom. They were like, were they £1 each or something? And of course, that made, you know, that was eventually released as a novel and made into a movie.
Well, worthwhile little exercise he did there, because it was a massive film as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was a massive success. It was the idea, I believe, of Malcolm Edwards, who I used to work with at Orion, who is a genius for this kind of thing. And I think he and Stephen King had a conversation and said, well, if you want to do a serial like this, let's do it. And he put the whole backing of what's interesting is it's an Orion. It's the only Stephen King book on Orion's list because Malcolm had that idea, and I don't think Stephen's publisher in the States, regular publisher, wanted anything to do with it because of that upheaval. But Orion made it an event,
so
and it was an event.
So The Green Mile was released by Orion.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And if you think back, I mean, I might be wrong here, but I think of all of the Stephen King books, novellas, novels that were turned into film, and Green Mile's got to be, if not the biggest, maybe Misery's probably his biggest ever movie, maybe, but The Green Mile's got to be up there in the top 3, I reckon.
I think Shawshank is probably, in terms of most fun.
Yeah, that's
Shawshank
true.
Shawshank
was huge. Yeah,
was a flop. Shawshank was a flop when it came out. It didn't do well at all. But DVD and VHS, so it became one of those things. People watched it again, recommended it to their friends, word of mouth, and it's now. I think it's one of the few films on IMDb that has 100% rating or something.
Here we go.
Like
That's something we should look up for next. Or if you know, send us Stephen King's top 5 movies, and I want to know where Green Mile was within that. But listen, Mark, we got to get us down to some serious discussion now, because I think it's time to start a campaign. I do. I think it's time, and we're in a position to do this because I have a real thing. I'm off on a rant again.
There you go.
I have a real thing about 99p books,
right.
not because authors are having to sell their books at 99p, but to me it just seems like daylight robbery. Absolute daylight robbery. And the fact that, like Cathy said, you know, oh, you're ripping us off, you're extra quid. It's like, oh, come on, guys. No, seriously. Like, If you dropped £1 or $1 in the street, would you go home and sit there crying for the next two? No, you'd be like, oh no, I dropped. This is like the work of an author who's possibly spent 1, 2, 10 years writing this book, and then people are it's like you've always said, it's a race to the bottom, and I think it should be banned. I think there should be a minimum price for eBooks for any book in the world. I think it should be a minimum. I think it should be like £5, £4.99, something like, and to recognise recognise the value of what goes into writing a book. Because when did this happen? At what point in society did we decide that it was actually legitimate to sell a book for 99p? That's less than an ice cream that you can get from your local ice cream van. Honestly,
I don't. I know you haven't been in the UK for a while, but ice cream's £2.50, mate.
Well, exactly. Talk about the weird thing is right now. I mean, there are obviously. I'm kind of jesting, but I am serious as well. But I mean, and right now, there's much bigger things in the world to worry about, obviously. But you think about the cost of goods going up. The problem with the 99p is you can never increase it. Dollar stores have done it over here. They call themselves dollar stores, but there's nothing in there for $1 anymore.
Yeah, we have pound stores as well, yeah.
It's like it's a dollar store, which means there's nothing less than $1. But the 99p, that you're stuck, aren't you? Who's going to one day say $1.99 because of inflation? I mean, eventually inflation's going to take it to that, but no one wants to shift, and it's ridiculous. It's silly. It's a silly amount of money.
I do love it. I do love it when you go off on one. Speaking as someone whose book The Crow Folk was in the Kindle monthly deal for 99p, and got into the top 20 of some very good categories. Nice. I agree. I mean, it is interestingly in the States, promo prices seem to be going up. $2.99 seems to be a promo price now. $1.99.
Yeah, but even that, Mark, $2.99. You go back 10 years. How much did we pay for a paperback? How much did we pay for a hardback?
Yeah,
never. It was never $2.99.
No, and it's interesting. Books have not really gone up with cost of living. They really haven't.
Because each year, let's talk about inflation quickly. Let's go to economics. We've done economics. I love a bit of economics. But if you think about what's happening in the world right now, obviously we're being told that inflation is about 7%, roughly 7%. So that means the 99p book a year ago is now worth, and I can't do the reverse of 7%, but it's kind of about 90p, right? So you lost between 7, 8, 9, 10%, whatever it is. But the crazy thing is that if you look into the statistics behind how they measure inflation, they are using a different basket of goods today than they used back in the 80s. So when we say, it was 15% back in the 80s, well, they were measuring it against a different basket of goods, which apparently all the bright economists out there have said that 7% today is more like 15% in the 80s. So the cost of living's going up, and yet we're still doing this ridiculous 99p book price.
It's weird that you bring this up as well, because a couple of days ago I recorded an interview with Erica James, who's coming back to the podcast.
Fantastic.
And the thing that came up in the conversation was the journalist and writer Caitlin Moran. She put a column in the Times, and this is based on a tweet she saw from a writer called Andrew Mackey, which she was saying, look, Mother's Day is coming up in the UK, and you buy a card for Mother's Day and you'll spend £3-4.
Oh, at least, yeah.
At least. For
what is a terribly written bit of prose.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
how long does that take?
To a lovely mum, blah, or whatever,
Bash them 10 or 20 of those out a day.
We don't think anything of spending £4 on one of those. And yet we all get the hives when we want to spend £8 on a paperback, which consists of 80, 90, 100,000 words.
It's ridiculous.
Caitlin was saying, based on this thing she saw from a tweet, she was saying, why don't we just start sending paperbacks as cards? And you can go into a secondhand bookshop and buy a perfectly good book for 50p or £1 and gift it to someone as a card. Dear mum, I think you'll love this book for Mother's Day. But, buy Cathy's book or Erica's book.
That's brilliant.
and just and one, it doesn't get thrown in the recycling after 2 weeks, and two, it stays on their bookshelf forevermore. And there's a lovely sweet message in there.
So
as well.
what about indie authors out there in the world? What about creating the card inside cover? Like, so you print the card that can be written out to someone. It can be a gift book.
It's a clever idea.
Genius.
Yeah. A gift page.
Gift books, they'll call them gift books. In the Wikipedia entry, though, you've got to attribute that to this podcast episode because it started here. But I'll let everyone have it. Go for it. Try it.
You can have that one for free.
Yeah, have that one for free, like everything else in the world, like the 99p books, which is basically like 0p with inflation right now. But the point is that I think, all right, shall I say this? I think we need to ban the 99p book. And if everyone did it, then it would become, maybe we might even push it to $1.99. My goodness me. That is almost a packet of hobnobs, I think, Mark, out here. But the point is that if everyone does it, that's where we're going to start to get the value back. Because here's the thing. When you see a book for 99p, I really believe that the value of something is usually shown in the price of it. Like, look at the rest of the world, right? Look at everything. Like, if you want to buy a Tesla over here, you're going to be paying $50,000, $55,000, but you're going to get maybe a better car than something that's going to cost you $20,000. I'm not so sure it's the case with watches. I've always had a bit of a thing about paying like Rolex. I think that's just a bit of a
headphones as well. Headphones. Don't get me started on
headphones as well. Yeah. So we're excluding headphones from this discussion and watches, but everything else, like organic food. I've grown organic food. I know how much it costs, how much extra work you got to do because you can't just blitz the land with Roundup or whatever. But it costs more because there's more involved in actually creating that food, and therefore it's probably better for you and healthier for you. So there's a link. But when people see a book for 99p, to me that is discounting the value of it. It makes it feel cheap and rubbish, to be honest. And I know that we've had to do it as well. And but I know a lot of authors, as they start to build success, I think Shannon Mayer was telling me about this fairly recently. Like, I think her books are now all like $4.99, $3.99, and promotions, obviously. But please, folks, value your books. Don't, if you want to do a special, go for it, but don't price your books at 99 cents or 99p ongoing, because I think it just devalues it. And I think we all need to stop doing it to bring back the value, the perceived value at least, in what books are and how they should be valued by the readers and how they should be valued by the world.
Here. And this is where I apologise to listeners in Australia, where because of increased paper prices, Ingrams have asked us to put the paperback of Back to Reality up by $1. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, we're putting it up by $1. Yeah, so go buy it and love the fact that, you see, the other bit that we're not talking about here, and we should do a whole show on this, but we will do a whole show on this, a Two Marks rant special. Oh, no. No, we should, because I think it's really important. The other thing is that, if you're writing a book and you get stuck in that 99p, it's very hard to get out of it, and everyone does it because everyone else does it because everyone else is doing it. That's the business logic behind it. I once set a business up back in the 90s and it got replicated by about 400 other websites. I was the first to do it. It was to buy and sell property online. It was back in before Amazon, before eBay, before Google. And one day I was sitting there and I thought, well, I've got to price this up. What's a property advert going to cost? And honestly, I went finger in the air, £47. I don't know why. I heard the word. I did research it, but I knew that 7 seemed to be a kind of magic number. It wasn't quite 9. I didn't want to go 49.99 and play that. I thought 47. That feels a solid number. Well, I'll tell you something, Mark. How many of those 400 websites that copied my idea over the next 5 years, what do you think their pricing was? Have a guess.
Was it 47 quid?
It bloody was. It was $47. And I remember one day we created this association, and we were on like the BBC News and everything, and we all got together. all these people that copied my idea, and so many of them came up to me and say, Mark, really interesting, the £47, that figure, that was that magic figure. Like, how did that come about? And I'm like, I just made it up. And they were like, what? We thought you'd researched it and da-da-da. I said, no, I just guessed it. So, this 99p, it's just somebody did it once and got to number one, and everyone's like, oh, okay. And it's become the norm, and it shouldn't be the norm. Books shouldn't sell for less than $4.99. eBooks.
It could be worse. I remember a time before Kindle when Sony had an e-reader, and to grab their share of the market, they were selling novels for 20p.
Oh.
But what happened was, now here's the good thing. We hadn't, as publishers, okayed that. So we said to them, you're still paying us the full royalty based on the full price, which we did. So that was a very good year for my Christmas bonus, and a very good year for all those authors who did tremendously well out of it. But yeah, Sony made a massive loss. And then Kindle, because the Sony device, you had to plug it in to your PC, and you had to download an app that interacted with it. And then Kindle came along with a device where it was all in, it was all wireless, and you didn't have to do it. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Let's actually... Go on.
I was going to...
We've got a spotlight to do.
I know. I'm sorry, folks. This has gone off. We've gone off on one here. But to be continued. And if you agree... Now, this is interesting. If you agree with the rant, or if you disagree with the rant, we want to hear from you, because I think this is what this is all about. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate about this. Let's find out about why you think 99p books are great, or 99-cent books. But if you agree with it, I want to get a sense as to whether I'm touching a nerve or touching, or authors agree with this, and maybe even readers. One thing I'm going to throw in as a teaser for when we do this as a special, I think there's a new model that we should invent. And the model is, if you want to sell your book at 99p, you put at the back of your book, look, I sold this for 99. You might have bought this if you bought this for 99p and you loved it, please come to my site and give me a tip if you loved it. And we do a tip jar as an author. So, all right, if you didn't like the book, fair enough. But if you absolutely loved it and you think it's worth way more than 99, then go and pay the rest of it once you've finished it. That could be an interesting model. And I wonder if anyone's going to try that out as well. Anyway, to be continued, because you're right, Mark, we have an incredible spotlight today. Now, the spotlights is when we take we pluck an author out of the Bestseller Academy, and we give them a spotlight on the show because of incredible things they're doing. And today we are focusing on an incredible academate that we've got called Tom Evans. And I know, Mark, you've chatted with Tom as well, haven't you?
Love Tom to bits, and he's looking for an agent. So agents, sit up, listen up, because you want to talk about an author who innovates, and the hardest working author in show business as well. I mean, the stuff that Tom has done. So Tom is an established author. He's already written 15 nonfiction and short story books, and he's got several more that he's co-authored. He focuses on writing about creativity, and he's been great in the academy because he always contributes, always, has great ideas. He writes about mindfulness, philosophy, metaphysics. But before all this, he wrote a novel that he never published, and it's called Soul Waves: A Future History, and it's about the future of humanity and the end of life as we know it in less than 100 years. But in the first lockdown, he wrote a set of 12 short stories called Soul Waves Insertions that are prequels and sequels to the novel. So go back to, I guess, Cathy and this whole idea of having short stories that build a bigger universe. And this year he's writing Soul Waves, the Duodex, which starts way in the future and brings the whole thing to a conclusion. So this is all good. And I love this. Each of the first two books is accompanied by an album of ambient music, which you can listen to while reading. And I'm disappointed in you, Mr. D, that you didn't come up with this first.
Well, I know, right? No, but this is why I love what Tom's doing, because actually, I mean, a massive part of Tom's background is he does guided meditations. This is his thing. And he has got, if any of you are on the app called Insight Timer, look up Tom Evans. He has a huge number of people that listen to his guided meditations. And what Tom's doing is absolutely brilliant, is he's taking all of these different talents that he has, and he's kind of looking at ways to integrate them. So, and he's just a wonderful person. He's out there like bringing goodness to the world. And I think right now, especially with everything everyone's been through and everyone's going through right now, this could be an absolutely fantastic idea. And we've seen this before, haven't we, Mark, where authors have kind of combined books with soundtracks and the like, but combining it with a soundtrack that is something which is kind of a healing, meditative journey for people. I mean, could be a very, very powerful combination when then combined with his book Soul Waves as well. So any agents that kind of are fascinated by that, I know there's a ton of agents out there that are into, meditation and the like, get in contact with Tom.
I mean, Tom says here, I'm now ready to step up and get a bestseller out there. Why not that Netflix, Amazon Prime or Apple TV series too? Now, if anyone can do it, I think it's Tom, because, he's built a house from scratch. They're refurbishing a bungalow. He's getting the whole world to meditate. He does remind me of you, Mr. D. He's a doer. Yeah, he's a doer. He gets things done. So
he's definitely a soulmate. I'd say that. And and he's this whole mission about trying to get the world to meditate one person at a time. He's doing for absolutely nothing. He's doing that all off the goodness of his heart and the kindness. So I think if there's an agent out there that's looking for like one of the most wonderful people on this planet, you want to get in contact with Tom and find out more about his book. And you can do that by visiting his website, actually. And if you're interested in finding out more about all his meditation, it's all on there. Tom Evans, EVANS.co, just .co. So tomevans.co. And Tom, we wish you all the best. We can't wait to see. I mean, obviously, how you're obviously already growing within the Academy. We can't wait to see where this might lead.
Absolutely. And we'll put a link in the show notes to that as well, so you can find him nice and easy. And if you enjoyed this week's episode, you can subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts from. Thanks as always to Dave and JD, our editors, and come and find us on social media. We're at Facebook, Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is at Bestseller XP.
Fantastic. And don't forget, folks, support this podcast if you like the rants and you want more of them. Well, support the podcast, bestsellerexperiment.com/support. And if you want to, like Tom, take your writing to the next level, then come and join Mark and I at the Academy, the Bestseller Academy. You can sign up today. It's academy.bestsellerexperiment.com, and we can't wait to become your coaches. It's so much fun and it's so inspiring. Come and join us. So, Mr. Stay, rant ended. I just was thinking, what are we going to be like when we're 80 and we're doing this? God, can you imagine?
Waldorf and Statler
it
from
would
the
be
Muppets.
Hilarious. Are we just warming up? That's what I want to. Am I just warming up? No, I'll be back. I'll be back to my calm self.
You need to meditate.
I do. I'm going to go and listen to some of Tom's. Obviously,
yeah.
I'll go and listen to some of Tom's meditations, and I'll be all back and grounded next week. But no, to be honest, I do love a little bit of a laugh. But thank you so much for joining us. And if you've stuck with us, this has probably been one of our longest ever episodes.
Yeah, we got.
I apologise for that.
Shorter.
It's all my fault. But thank you for sticking with us, and I hope you've had fun along the way as well. So listen, have a great week, Mr. Stay. I can't wait to chat with you next week. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1
and a goodbye from Mark 2. Zen, everyone. Goodbye.